idea.
I'm not sure. Because, yeah, no, because I just dropped him off. I'm not sure he's coming. We gotta text him.
Yeah. Is he coming?
He doesn't know. Anyway, he went out of his way to say you can do it all you want. And I just wander around.
You absolutely, sir. Absolutely. We're waiting for Marvin, I think.
I'm doing good. How you doing, Dr. Brown?
So maybe I need to go to Chester.
I can't do it, dude. Whenever I have a tie on, it's because I absolutely have to.
Okay, we can start. He said no, don't wait on him.
He's not coming?
Yeah, but you said don't wait on him. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to March 8th Criminal Justice Meeting. Call to order.
Thank you. Commission members Brown,
Present.
Carter, Harris,
Present.
Herr,
Present.
Rodriguez,
Present.
Vice Chairman Little,
Present.
Chairman Vieira. We have a quorum.
Flag salute. Would you please rise for flag salute?
Everyone can put your right hand over your heart and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Presentation this morning by Mr. Stan Mohammed. Morning, sir.
Everybody feel it?
Great.
What I want to do is pass out some First, I would like to say good morning to the commissioners and to staff. Madam. He's hiding over here. Okay. Today we're here to leave this to a statement that was made about a month and a half by our mayor. He made a statement basically
campus. We've been in Sacramento, San Diego. We've been in several cities, and the one thing that we do throughout our assessment is we do surveys. We like to talk to all of the service providers in the community. We like to talk with law enforcement to find out what their issues are, what their concerns are, what are some of the creative solutions that can be inserted. And most importantly, we want to talk to the community members who are affected by the violence most importantly. And we'd like to touch at least 325 residents because we really want to hear from the people. We want to hear from the individuals who are contracted to provide services. And last of all, we want to do one-on-ones. Because what we found is when you meet with people one-on-one, you really get important information that people are unwilling to share in large group settings. Next slide. I've talked about primary prevention. I think it's important. Safe places for youth, making sure that young people have alternative options other than dealing with violence or being affected by issues in the community with gangs. Gangs are recruiting at a young age, and we want to put a stop to that, especially in the city of Lancaster. We can go to the next slide. This is one of the programs that my colleague Ansar Muhammad is leading right here in the beautiful city of Lancaster, where you have high-risk youth who are in the community, really don't want to speak out on the issues that they're having, but with somebody who has the license to operate and understands it, they come in and they open up to him. So I'd like to bring him up at this particular point and let him finish out this presentation. Thank you for listening. We appreciate the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So what you're looking at there is some young people over at Cole Middle School. The majority of them either know someone who has been killed to gang violence or have family members who is actually gang members. And so what we do every Friday is we discuss strategies on how to navigate in this horrific society that these young people have to grow up in. And we allow them to share their experiences from the home base to the school base to the community. And then we create goals that they can navigate and be successful in life, despite the fact that their uncle or their father, in some cases their mothers, is entrenched in the lifestyle. What we're learning here in the Antelope Valley is that we have over 50 gangs, Bloods and Crips, have migrated to this area. And so we want to be on the front end to make sure that the CVRS, the Comprehensive Violence Reduction Strategy approach, is adapted now so we can begin to address what's happening in our communities and also deal with those who's migrating to Lancaster to make sure that we are safe here 24/7. Next slide. Community violence intervention. Why is that important? Because you have to have a coordinated effort with individuals. We call them ambassadors for peace. These individuals, as some of us, my colleague and myself, we've been in that life. We know what it feel like. We know what it look like. We know how to address it. We have to have these type of people on the ground that have what we call the license to operate. That license to operate give that individual an opportunity to speak directly to the hardcore population. And by the way, the hardcore population is probably less than 5% of any known gang here in the Antelope Valley, or really across the country. Next slide. Gang intervention. So we came up with this several years ago, and this is part of the model that was adapted in Los Angeles. And there are several points here, but one in particular, I want to draw your attention to the license to operate. Why is that important? Well, everybody cannot affect an individual who's running around here with a gun. And they're here, young people who's toting guns. You have to have a specialized person that know how to really talk to that individual to make sure that that individual do not become a nuisance in our community. So we teach on the license to operate. Why? And the other one, street mediation. Why is street mediation important? Well, there was a murder that took place in the summer months, and we actually ended up organizing around that matter. And you all may have seen it in the paper. We had several press conferences. We asked Mike and Tonovich to put up a $20,000 reward. Ron Settles was a good young man. He was not a gang member. He was actually inspiring to become a firefighter, and he was at the wrong place at the wrong time at the Park Circle Apartments. Immediately after that murder, we assembled a handful of community organizers, and we went into that particular location. We went door to door. Not only that, we had a press conference subsequent to that. And to make a long story short, there's an individual who's in custody now looking at murder. Street mediation is important because in that process, we learned that there's two homegrown gangs here. Okay, and our captains know all about it, but they're homegrown. And you cannot detect what the mayor feels is a detection with colors with these homegrown gangs. You can't detect it from red or blue because they're wearing all different kind of colors. You have to know who these individuals are. So when we done the press conference and we realized that rumors was floating around that Ron was a gang member, the person who killed him was from Watts, et cetera, we found out that it was no one outside that created that murder, killed that man, that it was somebody that was homegrown. Next slide. Community engagement. Why is this important? Why is it important to community organizing around violence? Well, a lot of people is afraid to even address violence. And so what we've been doing is having community forums. We asked the stakeholders, we identified what we believe is a hot zone, which is off of 10th and Avenue I. We set up shop over there and we opened up a community center. And what we found out in that area is a lot of gang activity, a lot of drug activity, and a lot of prostitution. And so what we've been doing is community forums to talk about gang education, harassment, and then we're going to be doing Know Your Rights forums and workshops. Next slide. You all is familiar with the Community Action League. I think some of my colleagues is here. Through the Community Action League, we've been doing some phenomenal work organizing around issues. And so our goal is to have coalition building. Individuals who want to sit down and talk about how do we address this from a community standpoint. Next slide. What you see here is in our community center. We brought most of these people up top is from that area, 10th and I. And what we found out in listening is that law enforcement is doing their part, but nobody else is doing anything about it. And so we know we can't arrest our way out of the problem. So what we've been doing is talking about how do we get community stakeholders engaged. When you see a young person who may be on meth, how do you address that? When you see a young person who is an active gang member, how do you address that? And so we've been meeting on a regular basis and we've been coming up with ways to do so. Next slide. Now, back in 2012, what we determined to make our job a little easier, we created the Helper Foundation Training Academy. That Training Academy, what we've been doing is really giving the service providers the tools and the knowledge to service the population that they're contracted to serve. So we've been training the Department of Mental Health, the Department of Children and Family Services, and several others, even down to LAPD and LA Sheriff Department. Next slide. Some of the topics of discussion are multi-generational gang families. What we're finding out, again, is that picture that we showed you, some of those youth is coming from a multi-generational gang background. And so even though they're in school, they're trying to do the best they can, but we're finding out that their fathers and uncles and aunties are entrenched, and ultimately that environment that they have to live in is toxic. And before you know it, that person is off to the races becoming a gang member. This here, Jim Brown, we partnered with him. He's one of our mentors several years ago. And this is an event over at one of the schools in Inglewood that we're contracted to provide the services to those 200 and something odd students. And so what you're looking at here is broken youth who went through the Mary Cam program, and now they're on the pathway to success. Next slide. Multi-sector collaboration. Why is that vital? Because law enforcement can't do it by themselves. Our beloved clergy who's present can't do it by themselves. It takes a multi-sector collaboration approach, specifically to deal with the youth who is either in a gang or is flirting to become a gang member. So these are some of our partners here. Can you go back to the next slide? We work with the probation department. We just inked a contract to provide some services to 50 youth, hopefully over at Eastside High School. And so we'll keep you guys informed. You see Los Angeles, the city of LA here. So we know the importance of collaboration. Without collaboration, things can get a whole lot worse. What we want to do for our mayor is to give him something tangible, something that's evidence-based, but most importantly, something that's community-orientated. And let him look at this to a point to where he adapts it for the city of Lancaster. So our recommendation in my closing is that the commissioners take a recommendation back to the mayor and ask whether or not the mayor can go ahead and adapt this model and give us an opportunity to present in front of full city council the full comprehensive violence reduction strategy, because what you're seeing here is just an introduction. Okay, so we want to thank you all for this opportunity, and we look forward to working with the city of Lancaster in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Mohammed, thank you so much. Before you leave, we may have some questions.
Mr. Mohammed, thank you very much for that presentation.
Very
You
welcome.
guys have obviously got a lot of commitment to this, and you've thought it through very carefully. You made a comment. How do you address that? And help me get a little closer to the ground. For example, identify a person who's a violent person, and then I think the phrase was an intervention. Walk me through that a little bit. How would you make that identification? What would the intervention actually be? And then how do you follow up to hope that that intervention holds?
What we do from an intervention standpoint is we identify these so-called leaders, these individuals who have the influence over these young people. And we ask them about really their rank and file. For an example, this Friday we're going to be hosting a social night for youth. Well, we know some of those youth is going to be involved in a gang situation. But we're going to open up our doors. And now once we begin to hear the language, once we begin to see the body language and the conversations, that's when the interventionist, the specialist, the one who knows how to go there with that person, meet that person where he or she is at, and pull that person to do a one-on-one. And what we're finding out when we do the one-on-one, we're finding out that their uncles or their cousins, somebody in the family is entrenched. And so we ask the question, so where's your father from? And they may say they from Grape Street Watts. Well, Grape Street Watts have ambassadors there. That's part of our county network. So we put a phone call in and say, look, we got so-and-so over here in Lancaster. He's claiming to be from Grape Street Watts. This is not what we want in our city. We would like your permission so we can do an intervention on this young person. So if he ever come back to Watts, he's with us now. And so what we do is we start doing what we call intense intervention on that individual, one-on-one, and then ultimately the goal is to get into the family structure. But we have to create incentives in order to get that person out of that mentality and out of that lifestyle. And what we're finding out, the root cause, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, is a lack of love. These young people is not being loved. And so they run to the gangs looking for love. And so we share our personal experiences. I am from that lifestyle. So when I share my personal experience, they be like, wow, Melvin is from that lifestyle. So when he share his personal experience, it's kind of hard to debate it. And we let them know the end result, prison, juvenile hall, death. And they open up, well, look, if you went through it, how did you get out? And I'll take them through the process of how I was able to exit and what it took. But it's intense. And we don't disclose our discussions with no one. We ask those who work with this individual, just look at the process, look at the progress. And before you know it, you got a human being who's fit to come back into society. And they become youth ambassadors, by the way. Now they become that person. When they see something happening in the neighborhood, they be the ones to check it before we even show up. Because ultimately, they're going to end up with the captain if they don't get it right. And we tell them straight up. And you don't want to go there. Now, what we've seen also, those who want to be hard-headed, they find themselves in juvenile hall or find themselves over Lancaster State Prison. And when they get out, they were like, man, I wish I had listened. So it's intense. And we have probably over 2,500 hours of training through LAVITA, the Los Angeles Violence Intervention Training Academy, where all those who is contracted with the city of LA to provide these services have to go through an intense training. I think it's about 15 weeks. Intense training. Thank you. Very welcome.
Mr.
Muhammad.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just to, and you also mentioned, I think it's in a similar vein, that when you anticipate someone's going to be released from prison, you start early.
Absolutely.
And again, what's the nature of that intervention? In other words, you've got to in some way alter the motivation of the person so that they are going to approach life in a different fashion when they get released from prison.
We know that food, clothing, and shelter is the primary need for human beings, and so we start there. We offer food, clothing, and shelter, and if we don't have it within our own agency, we direct that individual to an organization that provides those services. We have probably throughout the state level individuals who we correspond with. We call it the prison ministry. We make sure that these individuals receive information on how to even deal with peace strategies behind the wall. So when an individual comes home, we get that phone call. Now, if that individual is just bent on doing something crazy, we warn them and we let them know this is not going to be conducive to your well-being. But in most cases, what we've seen, and we've gotten guys that have done 20 plus years who have come home and is doing phenomenal. Some of them was doing life. I mean, phenomenal. But we stay with them throughout the process. We don't just say, come on, we happy you home. We stay with these guys, as a matter of fact, probably for the rest of their life, because they got to have a positive mentor, somebody that they can talk to, that's somebody that they can trust and believe in, and somebody that's going to give them quality information that's not going to judge. So we got guys that done 20 plus years at home and doing good, taking care of their families, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you. Very welcome.
Mr. Muhammad, thank you for being here, and also,
Thank
but
you.
couple questions. How is this funded, coordinated, governed? How are you?
Say that again?
How are you being funded and governed and coordinated on this whole process that you're doing? And have you looked at the needs of the violent crimes in the Antelope Valley, Lancaster, and come up with any assessment of what is needed up here?
We haven't done an official assessment yet. We're hoping that the city will identify the resources to allow us to do what we believe is the comprehensive assessment that my colleague, Mr. Hayward, spoke to. But in the meantime, what we've been doing is an unofficial assessment. For an example, at Park Circle Apartments, what you have there is a lot of low-income women who would go in, get an apartment, and do not put their boyfriend on the lease. Well, what we're finding out is the boyfriends in some of these cases is gang members. And so we've been doing an unofficial assessment, and what you have in Lancaster is hot spots throughout the city, especially on the east side. And these communities is underserved in terms of services. So we're looking to really ask the mayor to identify resources, since he was willing to put up $1,000 per conviction of a gang member. We're going to ask that he redirect those resources to allow us to do a comprehensive assessment and then give a report back to you all on what the findings was.
You are aware that the mayor, that was a personal, that
Yes,
wasn't
I'm
a
very-
city?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Now, the way we're funded in Los Angeles is all through federal monies and tax-paying dollars. The mayor saw fit, Viragosa, to identify around about 23 plus million. And so what he did is he created a department called the GRID, Gang Reduction Youth Development. And he allowed those funds to come up under his roof, and ultimately all the service providers that deal specifically with violence reduction would have to apply for those funds. So for an example, our agency is funded in District 11 under Mike Bonnet, Councilman Mike Bonnet. And those funds is restricted. We have to serve up to 50 youth, 25 in Mar Vista and 25 in Venice. And we've been part of the funding cycle in Los Angeles since the Bridges days, which was back in 2001. It's going to take the city to, after we do this assessment, what we're going to find out is that the money is here, the resources is here, but it's not coordinated. And so it's going to take an concerted effort on behalf of the city, but we don't want the city to be the only entity to fund something like this. We want to do fundraising. We've identified, we're working with our local black clergy. We've identified some state funding. And so what we're looking for is partnership. Because even with that state funding, even if we don't get it or have enough time to apply, it's bringing us together so we can begin to apply for resources to work specifically, and I'm saying this specifically with that population. There is a whole bunch of services and programs out here. But when we deal with a targeted population that's entrenched in violence, limited. I want to thank Lee for what he's doing and for what Nigel is doing on campus, doing a phenomenal work, but they're limited. You know, so
I think that's one of the questions I think that we're looking at too, as far as funding and governing, how the funds are going to come from this to make this happen. And I think you're looking at a partnership with the city is what you're asking for, I'm assuming. Yeah, and then looking at things that, defined on measuring from your group as far as maybe something for the city to look at would be the violent crimes, Lancaster violent crimes, the Antelope Valley crimes. Have they been defined? What should we be looking at as a commission? What should recommendations we should make to the council to move forward? So I think this is phenomenal. What you've done, and it sounds great, but I think as a commission, we look at things of how can we make this thing get moving, and I think you've come to us and asked, and we're looking for those type of answers so that we can make a informative recommendation.
The good news here, ladies and gentlemen, is that this is not Chicago, okay? The violence is nowhere near some of the cities that we've been in. So we may not necessarily have to do a full assessment that would normally take $50,000+. We may be able to tailor that assessment based on the need and based on the violence that we have identified in the city of Lancaster.
Have you guys gone after any federal grants? Do you have a grant writer on staff? Or there's a lot of funds out there for that to where you can actually get funds needed to put your program in place here?
Well, this is not a program. This is a infrastructure approach. We believe that the programs is here. They're just not coordinated. That's part of, when we do the assessment, we'll be looking at what programs is here that specifically deal with this population and begin to do that multi-sector collaboration approach. But what we're presenting today is an infrastructure on how to reduce violence, something that will be sustainable, something that can be here as long as the city is here. Once it's implemented, what we are going to find out is that you have programs all throughout Lancaster, but nobody's working together. And so once we begin to pull the service providers together, we can see what kind of dollar is attached to that individual who's highly at risk. In terms of the federal funding, we've identified a grant. The issue is whether or not we have enough time to apply. We have assembled under our bishop and his leadership, our local black clergy. I've even sent the grant out to Nigel and Pathway. So the issue with that is about $400,000, but the issue is whether or not we have enough time to apply. But in the future, as we look for federal and state funding for this population, we just want to know that the city will be not only a partner, but law enforcement, district attorney's office, and any other member of our municipality coming on board to work with us as we approach this issue with violence.
Mr. Mahan, one other question is that with your organization, does this mean that if something was to materialize, that your group would control the money, the funding, and how this is spent in this area?
So we have a partnership with the Urban Peace Institute, which is founded by Connie Rice. We, in terms of funding here locally, we will be collaborating with our local black clergy, who, in my opinion, is the best advisors that we have in the city. We've had subsequent meetings with our local clergy, and so it would be a collaborative approach. So if any funding came, it would be a group decision. The Helper Foundation, the Urban Peace Institute, and our local clergy who have adapted this model. So we're going to pull this off. It would be great if the city was on board with us, because none of us want to live in a violent community. We just had a man stabbed, I believe, over the weekend, over at the trailer park. I wish we had some ambassadors that could have been on that. I wish somebody had made a phone call. I'm being told that the person who stabbed the guy could be an Aryan nation. So, you know, as things happening, our goal, though, is to make sure we're on the front end of this thing. Because what we are seeing in L.A., now that the Rams is there, and I believe is the San Diego Chargers coming too, you're going to have hyper-gentrification happening. So where is these black and brown families going to live? Well, they come into the Lancaster area. They come into San Bernardino. They come into Palmdale. They come into Moreno Valley. And if we're not on the front end, then, I mean, things can get real ugly real fast. So we want to be on the front end of this thing. And in terms of what the mayor said about Crips and Bloods, that's his opinion. You know, I respect the man. I respect his opinion. But he asked us to come up with something, and we have something. And it's a comprehensive approach, and it's being implemented in over 23 cities in the country. It's sought after right now throughout the country. So being a stakeholder, me and Melvin Hayward, we're residents here. So we want to bring our best practices to our city. That's the bottom line. That's what we're here for. We traveling all over the country, but we always ask ourselves, when are we going to do this at home? Well, now it's time for us to do what we've been doing across the country in our backyard.
Mr. Mohammed, during the presentation, you mentioned that we have 50 gangs in this area. I'm a long-time resident over here. It's hard to me to believe. You know, it's so hard to me to accept. Where did that number come from? 50
Law
gangs?
enforcement. So back in 2010, there was an incident that occurred over at Pete Knight High. Young African-American student, female, was beat up, for lack of a better word, and her arm was broken. There was a meeting that took place there, and what came out of that was Pete Knight. I believe they identified some resources to create a free zone or something was happening there. But through law enforcement, we received a list, and that list, and I'm sure the captain can attest to this, that list identified over 50 gangs. What I was looking for is how many of them was homegrown. And what I saw, it was only really two, in terms of black gangs, it was two homegrown gangs. The rest of them was Los Angeles-based gangs. Am I correct, Captain? Because he would know.
I would say that's probably pretty close. If you were to count up the representatives from every different Los Angeles-based gang up here, you'd probably be well over 50. But that doesn't mean that they necessarily have a presence here other than their individual members that spend time up here. But in terms of the quote-unquote homegrown, I think certainly less than half a dozen total.
Thank you, sir. Very welcome.
Any other questions? Thoughts?
So I'm hoping the recommendation can go to City Council and the Mayor that the city give consideration to allowing us to do a comprehensive assessment with a report to follow. And once that report is generated, based on what my colleague was saying, we are presented back to the city with our recommendations. And then at that point, we can begin to have subsequent meetings to collaborate and then look for state and federal funding and come up with ways on how we can fund a comprehensive violence reduction strategy. Now, some of the schools is already on board. Thanks to Mike Antonovich, before he left, he identified a few dollars for us to do a pilot program at a high school. That's happening. We're hoping to roll that out April 1. We'll keep the city abreast on what's happening, but Lee DeRico is already on the ground. I want to thank him for his leadership. I want to thank my colleague Nigel for what they're doing. I think it's at AV High. They're doing some phenomenal work with that population. That's not enough. East Side, what we're going to do with the county dollars is not enough, because it's like a person who goes to take a shower or a bath and get up out of that tub and have to put the same dirty clothes on. So when them youngsters leave those campuses, those certain neighborhoods is just a toxic. And the root of it, believe it or not, and we got to address it, is the meth epidemic. It's becoming the gateway drug now that the marijuana is supposed to be legal. These youth is now getting a hold to this meth, and it's so that's another subject.
All right, that is, thank you, Mr. Mohammed. I really appreciate the commission. Really appreciate
Thank you, guys.
One question? One more question?
One more
Okay.
question. I don't know you can release this information or not, but what is the annual budget for this organization right now?
For the Helper Foundation?
Yes.
We about maybe 500,000, but none of those dollars is for District 5, SPA 1. Those dollars is specifically for District 11, which is Mike Bonin district, which he just won yesterday. Congratulations, Mike Bonin, if you see this. He's our councilman down there. Those funds are restricted to that district. So in terms of this area, we have no funding allocated other than what Mike Antonovich identified, which is going to be earmarked for East Side High.
But there's been no assessment as far as what is needed in this area.
No assessment.
As far as crimes, violent crimes, or whatever you're needed.
No.
Or, okay.
And our goal is to do an assessment. If we do the assessment, then we can come back with something.
It's important that, to come back and say, this is where we're at, look
Yep.
at some numbers, because it's kind of.
Do you have any recent statistics on any of
Yes.
this?
From the local? No, nothing.
What's been working down in LA or what's been working?
Absolutely. Yes, we can
Share
provide.
this with us?
Yes, we can provide that. Not only that information, but the other cities. We can probably also. Come on up, bro. We can probably give you guys a report.
I think that, excuse me just for a second, I know we're running on time here, so I think that exactly what Lisa was saying is that would be helpful to bring those type of information back to us, because it's important. It's
And
important.
also,
that-
there's any payroll
Yeah.
out of that, you said, in the $900,000 or?
500.
500. Okay.
Yes, we can provide the last 3 years of statistics in the city of Los Angeles, specifically the grid areas, to talk about the decrease in violent crimes, talk about the decrease in violent crimes against law enforcement, talk about the increase in school participation, decrease in suspensions. We have that breakdown. We can provide that if you give us until the next meeting.
Absolutely.
We'll make sure we bring that to you.
And like Commissioner Harris said,
Along with the
as far as-
financial status, please.
Oh, well, the financial status is across the city. It's 23 million. Our agency is funded not only through the city, but through the county, through the Department of Mental Health, and we provide wraparound intervention services. But for our partner, Urban Peace, they have a budget of 1.6 million to do similar work. I think what I would like to say in closing, as the services have become so integrated, that LAPD sends us racers for every gang-related incident. I have one in my hand that happened last night, 25-year-old young man, shot in the head, shot in the back. So the services have become so integrated that LAPD sends the intervention agencies who are funded by the city the word. Oftentimes we get it through the community first, but we'll get those emails, and as soon as we get that information, we respond. So that collaborative effort is important, and law enforcement is a key partner in that process. But we'll bring those reports by the next
If you could
meeting.
bring that back, your budgeting type thing, so it
Yes,
gives
sir.
us something to look at and make some type of recommendation.
Absolutely.
To the council.
And we're not recommending that Helper be the agency. We're recommending that the city develop an entity to provide an infrastructure through this CVRS to provide services to the specific targeted population that we are talking about. So not a nonprofit agency being the structure, but the city providing the structure to provide that resource to the community, and those agencies apply for RFPs. And of course, we would like to help in that instruction and the development.
We'll
Thank you.
look forward to you coming
Absolutely.
back. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Mohammed, thank you, sir, so much. Mr. Hayward, thank you for being here. We really do appreciate it. Reverend Hearns.
Thank you so much for allowing me you asked a couple of questions, and I think I can add something to this. First of all, thank you so very much, and I can do this real quick. On the 28th of January, Mr. Bozigan and the mayor and Lee, all of them met with us right here in the room, and we talked about trying to understand the statement that he made, and he did help us with that and said, bring me something back. And this is what we've done. Ministers, we've come together. Mark has provided a place for us to meet, and we've met, I think, 3 times now or so. And what we've done is that we've brought to the table people across the black community, including the prison and everything, of what kind of things can we add? What can we bring to the mayor? And when Mr. Muhammad came up with this, then all of us got together and said, okay, we may not be this religion, we may not be that, but the idea and the concept we like, that we could present this to the mayor. Now, how do you handle the money and all of that will be up to you all, but we have a system which is under the Antelope Valley Partners for Health. We have a 501c3, and they are the physical managers for it. So we could handle the money if you wanted us to. That way it would make it valley-wide. But what I do want to say in my closing is that we're still meeting. And let's see, how can I say this without tearing somebody all to pieces? Well, let me put it this way. I don't think we as our black pastors have really, until here recently, really pull ourselves together from all over the valley and say, let's forget our denomination, let's forget who, but let's look at what. And Mr. Muhammad seemed to have a package that we believe will work at this point. We're going to examine it further, but right now at this point, that's where we are. I don't know if you have any questions to me.
Reverend Hearns, no, thank you, and everything you do. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Bozigan, Senior Manager.
Yeah, just to put a little context, appreciate Stan, your colleagues, and Henry's comments. As Henry said, the mayor threw out a challenge, which this group, led by Henry and a few others, have taken up. I do think it's appropriate to wait for them to finish their deliberations and make a formal recommendation to the mayor, because he's the one who asked for that. I do think there's a level of resources. I was talking to the other Mr. Paris over here, and one of the values that we're looking at is the engagement of the community, because whatever the program is, quite candidly, is secondary to engagement of a broad sector of the community taking responsibility for what's happening and putting the resources. So I do think it's appropriate to have Henry and his group with Stan present to the mayor, and then and then we would bring it back to the criminal justices with sort of a recommendation based on that. Henry, if you're okay with that?
I'm okay with it.
Gentlemen, good with that? Again, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Quite insightful, too. Any other comments?
Thank you for your time and your presentation.
Any speaker cards for items that we don't need to answer? So let's get right on. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes for February 8th meeting? Do I hear a motion? A second?
I make a motion to accept.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Second.
Dr. Brown? Approved 5-0. Mike? I missed you this morning.
As did I. I as well, sir. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will go through the statistics quickly and also have some closing comments. For the first slide, in general, February, as we all know, was a shorter month than normal. Activity there's a bit reduction in activity from the previous month. However, production has been just as good as previous months, if not better. So for felony arrest, we had in February 13, which was an increase of 3. Search warrants were also an increase of 3 with 7. And as you see also, firearms, we were able to get an additional firearm from February versus January, and a very significant increase for the burglary suppression team of recovered stolen property of more than $6,000 for a total of $42,000 from the previous month. So the Lancaster team also was productive. There was a drop in total arrest by 17 of 41. The month before they had 58. Again, that goes with the reduction in the number of days that they're available to work. Stolen vehicles was increased by 1 with 8, and they also had the same number of recovered firearms in February as it did in January. For the robbery suppression team, felony arrests were up by 2. They had 15. They were also up by 2 on search warrants and activity. They had 8. Total robberies was actually down. They had 35 in January with 27 in February. We're happy to report that. In our crime prevention activities, the month of February, at our Coffee with the Deputy on Thursday, our theme was Love Hurts, going along with our Sheriff's Department notice that was put on our website regarding to online dating. So there are some dangers out there, and we put some tips out there to the general public regarding that. We've also were productive or active in child safety and stranger danger, where our community relations team went to several different schools and spoke with kindergartners and first graders and talked about basic safety. Stay away from strangers. Only talk to parents or people of authority, people of uniform, and what to do in those type of situations when someone tempts you with a toy or a candy. Go find an adult or a teacher or someone that you're familiar with. We're continuing on with crime prevention for this month. As we start getting into the prom season, the local high schools, we're partnering with California Highway Patrol, and with every 15 minutes, Antelope Valley High School is going to have their 15 minutes, I believe, on the 30th of this month, along with a couple more next month. If you're not familiar with that, it is a very powerful program in which youth play different roles in a drunk driving scenario where there's an 18-year-old, most often is a drunk driver. We collaborate with several different entities and organizations. Tow Yard provides 2 vehicles that have been crashed, used previously, and we create a scene where there's a driver that's a DUI and there's passengers that are in other vehicles that are deceased, seriously injured. The parents are also involved, where we actually do notifications of the parent that your child was killed in a car accident. Throughout the school day, every 15 minutes, there is an announcement over the PA system on campus that there's a specific named student that was killed in a car accident. And there's a biography of that student that's read, and that student leaves the classroom, puts on a different costume, white paint all over them, and throughout the day, they still continue with their school activities, but every break or every 15 minutes, someone is announced. So at the end of the school day, you can have up to 15, 20 kids who, in this role-playing or this mock scenario, has been killed, signifying that every 15 minutes, someone is killed in a alcohol-related traffic accident. And then it continues on with realism, where the driver is arrested, is booked at the local sheriff station. They go through the breathalyzer, and they go through all the pretrial hearings, the court hearings, the proceedings, the conviction, the sentencing, and then the very next day there is a assembly, very powerful assembly, reinforcing to the youth, these high school students, the dangers with alcohol-related incidents. And it's always a good thing to remind them about this type of stuff, especially leading into prom. Continuing on, our community engagement. On February 22nd, we did do our quarterly report with our community advisory committee, reading our DOJ mandated report. We had a town hall meeting, and we called it Days of Dialogue, where we actually had an engagement with the general public. There were about, we were at Enterprise, I believe, Enterprise Elementary. And there were about 40 community members that went there. There were 15 deputies. It was, we even had a very significant number of Spanish-speaking community members that were there. We had Spanish translators. So it was a very engaging event where we had tabletop meetings, and we broke off and did dialogue, very opposite, counter to debate, where we were opening and listening to each other's concerns, and I think it was very productive. It was a very good event. Another thing that we did in January was our first annual Black History Month essay contest, which we held at Cole Middle School. Those students, I believe over 200 students, participated in this essay, where they wrote an essay about a member in the African American community who was a role model to them. And our sheriff visited the event. He was there as a presenter, presented along with many of our department executives. And I will also read off, we had the African American Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Marshall, the superintendent of Eastside School District. We had members of the AV chapter of the NAACP. I apologize for that. LA County Public Library representatives were there, along with the Black Peace Officers Association, which gave a monetary donation of $225 for first, second, and third place prize winners. I think I'll show you the picture of that. It was a fun event. The kids had a great time, and it was a very, very productive event. We continued on again with school fairs in our community engagement, and again, child safety. Celebrated Dr. Seuss's birthday last week with Read Across America. I can't tell you how many times I read Green Eggs with Ham I Am. So I'm sure many of us have read that book before. So
let's hear it.
Green Eggs with Ham I Am. Okay, then I got pictures to show you of that event, the next slide, in regards to our first annual Black History contest. So that was a lot of fun. And then the next slide also was we wanted to thank West Lancaster Little League, who also extended an invitation to the deputies for their opening day ceremony, where they paid tribute to Sergeant Steve Owen. His daughter represented the family. She was there. We had the opportunity to throw out the first pitch. There's a banner that they put on all three of their fields, the Monte Vista field, the Parkview field, both A and B fields. They paid tribute to Sergeant Owen. I read a very touching bio of him, and I think it was a very, very good eye-opening experience for some of the children, who really didn't know too much about it. And we thank them for paying that tribute to Sergeant Owen. So it was a great time. So again, it's just a great example of how not only the Sheriff's Department is engaging in the community, but the community is receptive in receiving to us. And then the next slide, what we have in the future is we're still receiving applications for our 36th Community Academy. And our Community Academy is pretty much, if you're not aware of it, it's an opportunity for 50 residents of Lancaster or Palmdale to participate in an academy where they get introduction to the services that are not only provided by the Sheriff's Department, but also just put your shoes into what it is to be a deputy sheriff, with role playing, with a visit to a jail in the PDC out in Castaic, as well as a ride-along, amongst many, many other services that we provide and classes that are taught on 8 consecutive Tuesdays in the evenings, starting this Tuesday on the 14th. So we've been doing that for well over 12 years now, and we do them at least twice a year. So this is our 36th. And we receive applications at the front counter. So if anyone out there still wants to do it, I believe we have about 12 seats left to get our maximum occupancy. We should be good. So if you're out there, please come join us. We'd be happy to have you in our class. And that concludes my crime stats commission report, but we also have ComStats to put out there on my next slide for the city of Lancaster. Just wanted to do, again, year-by-year comparison like I reported earlier last month. Our crime from 2016 in comparison to 2017 has dropped. As far as Part 1 crimes, we had 362 last year in February. This year in February, we had 303. So I wanted to make sure you saw that. And then the next slide.
Real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What city was higher than us this last month, Mike?
You know what?
Clarita. I'm just saying. We were lower than Santa Clarita this month.
Really?
This past February, yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. And they had the same amount of days in their month that we did too. So just want to make sure it was an even playing field.
Even.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you, sir. The next slide. I wanted to include rapes this month. Okay, the number of rapes that we had in the month of February versus January, it was a significant drop. We had 8 reported rapes in January, where in February we had 4. So we want to continue to have that number decrease. The next slide has robberies. Again, over the year, we did have an increase in comparison to January. We're right around that 27. Actually, 28 and we're still below the average. So we still want to keep those numbers as low as possible. And the next slide, please. Okay, aggravated assaults over the year, you can also see that there's been a significant drop from the previous month. We want to keep that trend continue to dropping. And thank you, burglaries also, you see the trend is also dropping. Larceny thefts also continue to drop. And grand theft autos, also a decrease there.
What are you attributing that to, Mike?
Well, besides, I always want to credit my partners for good police work and activity, but also engagement with the community. We've had a lot of crime prevention activities going on, as well as I just think we got good stakeholders with the citizens out here, and they're just not standing for crime anymore. And a lot of it's been reported, and we've been very productive in our caseloads and our arrest. So.
Good job.
Great job, Mike. Great job.
Everyone deserves.
Yeah, your department, unbelievable.
Station's
Great
done a
job,
very, very
Captain.
good job. The captain
Great.
and everyone else that's partnered with us. And then the last report I have is our LEAPS progress report. I'll give you some statistical data. Also, we had, our LEAPS was very instrumental in 3 of our arrests that we had last month, along with 7 surveillance observations, and also aided us in 2 warrant services that we had. Also provide aero support during 2 significant traffic stops. And of all those activities, the vast majority of them, 50% of them, were observations, again, where the aircraft was flying over and the operator was able to see something that struck his or her attention that helped us draw more ground resources to that location. 14% of those were vehicles that were either abandoned or related to an auto theft. 21% of those total were arrests or detentions, and then 14% were related to some sort of other activities such as an assault, a robbery, or a person with a gun or some other domestic violence. And those were all the dispatch activities, percentage-wise, that they have gone to. Other than that, I have no further information to report unless you have any questions.
No question, but
Yes, sir.
Mike, I just want to say thank you, and Captain here, thanks to Lancaster Sheriff's Station to catching that burglar, who broke it into Avenue I businesses multiple times. Yeah, thank you for that, and from bottom of my heart. Actually, he's at court today. His court day. He's got 22 counts. They trying to put him on 60-year sentence, but we'll see how that goes. And thanks again. That was excellent work, sir. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
We'll see you in April. Oh,
Thanks,
I
Mike.
did want to introduce my partner also at the keyboard here, Yanni DeSega. So
Welcome.
she also works in community relations and will be at my place in future times in the event that I'm gone. So just wanted to make sure you know. I will be in Hawaii in July, so I wanted to rub that in.
Strictly business, I tell you.
Of course,
Yeah.
business only. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. California Highway Patrol.
Good morning. My
Good
name
morning.
is Kathleen Toggenberger. I am a new lieutenant reporting to Antelope Valley Area Office. Well, actually, I'm not a new lieutenant. I'm transferring there. And I've met some of you, but I'm sure I'll get to meet everyone soon. We have a few statistics to bring up that are our jurisdiction. And for the months of January and February are what I was able to get the statistics for. But for DUI arrests, we had 37 in January, 33 in February, for a total of 70 in the first 2 months of 2017 alone. Fatalities, January we had 1 fatality crash. In February we had 4, total of 5, but we did have 6 deceased out of those 5 crashes. As far as collisions, in our jurisdiction, we had 148 in January, 126 in February, for a total of 274, and in those includes multiple DUI primary collision factors, so the DUI was at fault. And then for stolen vehicles recovered, we had 10 in January, 7 in February, for a total of 17. And we also have, of course, we're very active in our community and our community interaction events. I'm going to have my public information officer, Gil, who I think you all know much better than I do, will talk to that. I talk fast, sorry.
Way to go,
Good.
Gil.
Is this on? Is this on?
Yeah.
Happy to be here again. Good morning, everyone. Just a couple of things that I want to cover. First, we are looking for senior volunteers, 55 and over, that can help us out. They are the unsung heroes of our department. So we're looking to add at least 10 more. We have 20. We want to take it up to 30. Explorers, we started the Explorer program a year ago. We just graduated 8 new Explorers this past weekend, so we're up to 13. We're looking for 2 more. We want to have additional resources that we can actually put out in the community. Going along with the traffic collisions, DUI being a big factor or a big problem for the Antelope Valley. As Mike mentioned, we are focusing on every 15-minute programs that we actually doing here in the Antelope Valley. We have 4 schools total for the Antelope Valley. Very effective program where teens and schools actually take the lead role and and learn about the dangers associated with driving under the influence, whether it's alcohol or drugs. And now, obviously, marijuana is probably going to have its own section here in the near future. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. We're looking at Start Smart, which is another teen program that is focused on getting teens started on the right side, learning the basics, the fundamentals of the responsibilities of driving a vehicle, a 2,000-3,000 pound vehicle. The month of April is going to be our Distracted Driver Awareness Month, which is going to be focused on distracted driving, and that's from eating a cheeseburger all the way to talking on the phone, or just any type of distractions. We're focusing more as to everything that is distracting our drivers, which is a leading cause of traffic collisions out there. We lose over 3,200 people every year to distracted driving. And so that's a big issue. So month of April, Distracted Driving Awareness Month. The first week of April will be Teen Distracted Driving Awareness Week, which is focusing on under the age of 18. And those are just some of the few things that we have in the works here in the Antelope Valley. We can come back in May when all the schools have done their every 15-minute programs and give you a kind of wrap up as to what happened. Obviously, with the every 15, we work with the sheriffs. The Highway Patrol takes the lead role, being that it's a state program. With the Sheriff's Department, AMR, Fire Department, the courthouse, and let's see, I don't want to leave somebody else. The Antelope Valley Hospital. Thank you very much. It's the hospital that really gives us all the resources that we need to make this happen. And any questions? All right, well, thank you.
I just want to say thank you for developing this program over the years. I've worked with you on this, and it's grown and grown, and more and more high schools have gotten involved, and it's really well organized. It's very impressive when you bring the trauma victims into the emergency department. I think it's quite a dramatic impact on the students that participate, so thank you very much for doing that. How much, I was curious about, mentioned DUIs. Is the texting starting to rival DUIs as cause of accidents?
Distracted driving, it's a huge problem because it's one of the factors that usually goes unreported, or we don't know. But even with that, again, there's about 3,200 people that die as a result of distracted driving every year, and a little bit over 400,000 people that get hurt. And those are just on the reported traffic collisions. So it's very important to actually spread the word out. The distracted driving is the other program that we're actually focusing on schools. We have presentations that we do at the schools. So my goal has been and continues to be is to alternate the every 15 minutes every other year, and that off year to actually do a distracted driving presentation, reckless driving presentation at these high schools where that's where we need to start, is with the youth. Change the bad driving behaviors before they even start.
It's not very accurate statistic that we're probably able to give you for any agency, only because it relies on self-reporting. Is one of the questions we ask when we...
Kathleen, I think your mic's on.
I needed one.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We want to hear it.
One of the questions that any law enforcement agency asks when you walk up is, how fast are you going? Were you on the phone? No, I wasn't on the phone. I was not texting my daughter to see where she is at 10 p.m. And that's what we have to go by, because we can't just take the phone and look. You have to, a warrant. And in serious cases, we do, though. Serious injury and fatalities, we do.
Any other questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you, Gil. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Gil.
Mr. Franklin.
Okay, I have some quick statistics to go through. Unfortunately, I don't have all of February's, so but I do have January's. And so as far as felonies, obviously this is the entire Antelope Valley. We filed 216 felonies for the month of January and declined to file 86. As far as misdemeanors, again for January, we filed 797 and declined to file 100. For January and February, we have tried 23 jury trials for a total of 119 days in trial. And I also just did want to comment on the programs, the 15-minute DUI. I think that is a fantastic program. The lieutenant mentioned the 6 fatalities. That's just CHP. That's not including what Palmdale and Lancaster has brought into us in the last couple months. So it's there's seems to be just an unfortunate substantial amount of driving impaired fatalities for the last couple of months. And I have one person in particular who tries the majority of those types of cases, and I've now had to start spreading them out because it's just getting to be too much. And then, of course, with the legalized marijuana, hopefully the legislature will come up with some remedies for that issue. But I do want to just compliment law enforcement for their active involvement in trying to reduce the number of DUIs and clearly the DUI fatalities, because that is a real issue that I've seen up here. And barring any questions, that's all I have.
Mr. Vice Chair, I last meeting interrupted on Mr. Franklin's time, and I'd like to piggyback on him for just a few minutes. Okay. Recently, and some things have been coming to light, that there's some motivation somehow with certain community representatives or groups or self-appointed community leaders that I don't know of, that are coming to some conclusion that somehow now people who are incarcerated or pending trial or somehow are subjected to some intense scrutiny that's different in other parts of LA County. Now, I'm going to say to you that historically, since I've been around here a long time in a law enforcement public safety capacity since 1981, that we have a long history of a very tough district attorney's office. And that goes from Mr. Cooley through Bob Foltz to Danny Damon to Mr. Franklin, to a point where Mr. Franklin left for several months over to serve his country overseas, came back, and now, thank God, we have him back. Now, if you look at, I'm going to go into some numbers in my own time because I want to talk about that, just something recently that we went through to look at productivity of Captain Nelson's department, okay, and what's taking place in the management of cases that Mr. Franklin's office deals with monthly, okay. And I think there's a misunderstanding out in the community that this is just arbitrarily thrown at people to get them and coerce them into taking a plea based on what any potential risk they may take moving forward. But the reality of it is the law requires that, okay? The law sets sentencing standards. The law sets place what opportunities are there for people and explains to them what their potential sentencing could be in given cases, because we see it in the media all the time. I mean, you see that constantly. This person was arrested for this, so potentially they could face up to this much time in prison, whatever that may be. So I believe there's a duty, first of all, for and everyone being transparent to put that out there. The other part of that is there's an expectation that the district attorney's office represents the people. And when we say the people, we're talking about the victims of crime. So we get into this mentality these days that I see more and more, that which scares me to death, that persons who commit crime are somehow now some protected class of individuals that are the people that are in most jeopardy in our society, which that's not true, because for every arrest we know, and I'll bring Pat into this and whatever, we don't know the number of crimes they've committed. We only know the crime we've arrested them for. Sheriff McDonald went into depth on that last Thursday at a conference we were in the Sheriff's Department. But I want to tell you that Mr. Franklin has been an integral part of, in spite of every other city, for the most part, in the county of Los Angeles, crime rate going up, our crime rate has gone down. Okay, and that is a trend based on community partnerships that are taking place right in this room with the city, law enforcement, the community, different representatives of the community. And so I have a big concern on where we're going, some in this mindset that there's certain influence being taking place that impacts our ability to fight crime in this community that I believe is completely unwarranted. So I would say as a body, I think we owe Mr. Franklin a big thank you for the way he manages his office, the way his deputy district attorneys respond to his leadership, and the direction that we need to continue going in spite of all the things that have been thrown at this. And I'll go in more in my time what Sheriff McDonald talked about and the things that we're facing in the future, but I believe everyone in law enforcement and through the judicial process actually see what's taking place now. Okay, and there's some concerns I have with that. But I believe in my capacity, I would like to talk to anyone as it relates to some mindset that's being spun out there that people are being treated unfairly in our individual court. If you just look at the volume of cases in our court, what's taking place there, how many people actually end up in trial? We arrest how many tens of thousands of people a year, but how many felony trials do we actually do? Okay? And then we need to talk about that. Everyone has a right to due process and move forward to trial if they so determine to do that. But the idea that there's coercion to mitigate cases is ridiculous. That does not take place. Sorry about that. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Well, I think the mindset is of the city, and the city's made it perfectly clear that we're not going to tolerate crime in the city of Lancaster and the Antelope Valley. And this is a testament to Mr. Franklin, CHP, Pat Nelson, our captain, Jocelyn, Lee, Sheriff's Department. I mean, all of it. I mean, it's a proven fact, and it's come down all the way from Mayor Paris and from the council, and I think that's something that we should hold very high because that's important. You can see it in the stats. Just a question, and it could be way off base here as far as the parole system and individual getting out. I see a lot of things, and I see a lot of things that I read, and I find when you read these articles, and some are misleading, and some of this, that, and everything else. But there's people out there that have a long history of crimes. Are there stats out there that say, once these people are paroled and they are put back into society, what's the percentage of those returned people are going to do violent crimes? I mean, I just looked at the front page of the paper this morning, and there's one 50-year-old man that car chase and this and that, and then there's a history of violence, and yet he's paroled. He's on parole. I see this constantly. Where is the standard from the state that's been handled, everything's been approved, is that if you haven't done it, it's an automatic, you're out of the system and you're back on the streets?
I think that's a good presentation for next month.
Okay.
Because I will tell you it's more involved, and how far reaching, as well as the Sheriff's Department has put out an incredible report as it relates just to Prop 47. So not even being inclusive of AB 109, Prop 57, non-revocable parole, and the impact that's had. And then if we convert that, and I'll talk about something I did just recently to see what kind of dollars some of this is costing, is what the financial impact of all that has been down to the local level. So that's something I'm working on based on the numbers that were provided. It's a very good report as far as detail. And some offenders, there's one offender that's up to 56 arrests, Prop 47, and the majority of the arrests that they're getting arrested for on secondary or third charges are Part 1 crimes beyond the scope of Prop 47. So I think it's a good one just for the public to understand what the true impact has been. While it's done a reduction maybe for the state, what the impact financially is on the local level is shocking.
There's also obviously the issue with Prop 57, it's almost kind of inside baseball, but the whole, which I think I've touched on before, but if you're a second-time residential burglar, for instance, your maximum would be theoretically 17 years because you do get additional time if you've demonstrated a pattern of committing prior behavior. Your chances of recidivism are obviously much greater if you've already demonstrated a history of committing crime and then you get another crime. You're demonstrating to the community that you're going to continue to offend. So there's a thing called the base term, which, for instance, residential burglary is low term 2 years, midterm 4 years, high term 6 years. So we could say you're given midterm 4 years for the current offense, and you double that because he has a strike, that's 8, plus 5 year prior, that makes it 13. He would be eligible for parole, even with all of that, under Prop 57, after he completed his 4-year term. And then it's going to be the parole board's determination as to whether or not he should be getting out early or not. So it's a very disheartening situation.
Very. Mr. Franklin, thank you, sir, for everything you do. Thank you.
Chairman Little, I'd just like to make one comment on behalf of the mayor and in support of what Lee said. Mr. Franklin has been doing an outstanding job in our community. He's committed to making our community safer. He has done that, and he deserves all of our full support. So, Mr. Franklin, thank you, and we appreciate everything you're doing.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Paris. Thank you. Any other comments? Jocelyn.
Thank you. Good morning. Oh, almost good afternoon. Just no.
Well received.
I'll remember that at my time, too, by the way.
Just wanted to give you a heads up on what's going to be coming, what I hope to be bringing to you at the next meeting. In fact, I hope I get a draft to you in advance of the meeting so you will have time to review it and bring some questions or comments or suggestions. In the last few years, we've had ongoing issues with people conducting outside sales, outside solicitation in parking lots of county buildings, for example, and other privately owned properties, sometimes on sidewalks. In particular, we've had issues with the free phone sign-up giveaway people, and they just set up their little pop-up tent and open up for business wherever they'd like. It obstructs traffic. It causes issues. We've had a lot of city staff response time taken up with that and deputy time as well. So we've been directed by the city manager's office to put together an ordinance to tighten up our business licensing and to prohibit to the greatest extent possible outside solicitation, outside sales that cause nuisance and other unlawful conditions and activities. So I'm going to put together an ordinance. We'll be working on it over the next few weeks. As I say, I hope to get a draft to you in advance of the April meeting so that you can come with your suggestions, recommendations, whatever questions you may have. That's all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. DeRico.
Probably first and foremost, I want to bring to light that perhaps Mr. Humboldt knows that. I want to give you an example of what's going to happen in Europe. Okay, is just the level of service activity that the deputies under Pat's leadership here at the station has changed. Okay, just based on things we identified with Pat. addressing that issue where we saw because we pay millions of dollars for services, is that we're getting the most out of the money we're spending. Okay, and I think that's a testament. That number shocked me, actually. We went through that. That was a significant difference from where we were many years ago. So, Pat, I just want to thank you on top of where we're at, in light of all the things we're dealing with right now with our, I almost said crazy legislature, that's probably not appropriate. Legislatively, things that have taken place, and actually, probably a public that's not as informed as they should be on what the impact of these things should be, and maybe that's a focus we should go forward with, not understanding the full, far-reaching fallout that's associated with that. He's done an incredible job here. Still going to be part of us. I don't know for sure yet. At the end of the month, this is going to take place, but that's a big deal for us.
So Pat would like to say something? Captain Nelson.
First off, thank you. It's something that is intended to occur, but we'll wait and see till it does. But I do appreciate the support. One thing I can say that unequivocally is that we would never have had the success that we enjoyed over the last couple of years without the wholehearted support of the city and specifically Lee with our efforts. So thank you very much, and looking forward to continuing to serve in the North County, and hopefully that's the way it works out. So thank you.
Oh. I was just going to say thank you to the captain and for all he's done, and he's going to be. No, sir. I would never do that. I know the repercussions afterwards. So, yeah. That's right. I know. I understand how it goes. Yeah.
So, with that, I mean, I think there's some things we're really working on now, and as we looked at the effort here, we're moving forward with a project that's taking place on Avenue I, and I can tell you right now, I'm very excited about it. Okay, I mean, I'm excited for the potential, for how things are going to change, and I think that'll have a far-reaching impact into the community surrounding it as well, because we all know as that we change the climate in an area, it has more effect than just beyond dealing with that issue. So I'm looking forward to that. So we're committed with doing everything we can from public safety to assist other departments within the city and moving that project forward with working for the stakeholders in that area. So we're going to focus on that. Mr. Muhammad mentioned the AVA program, and I see that Nigel left. We're going to be doing a presentation for the high school board on the 15th. We've had meetings with Dr. Vieira. And for those of you that don't know, we've presented here to the Crime Commission, and we'll probably be coming back with some more numbers after we present with the school board. But that's been a program where we implemented that started out just to be an anti-truancy type program because of issues that were occurring at the school and then the surrounding area. But then it's gone into other directions, which we hoped it would do as far as networking with other service providers and everything as well. But an interesting phenomenon has happened is the numbers, I think you'll be impressed with when we present them, the percentage of kids that are now in school on a regular basis in that 90 to 100 percentile of attending class. But the interesting phenomenon is watch what it's done to our daytime crime rate in the draw area for that school. So, yes, we've been at it several years. The city committed all the resources to it initially. Now that's being picked up more by the district because the district sees the value in it and wants to expand that program to other high schools in Lancaster. So that's going to be something we're moving forward with. The Reentry Day Reporting Center. I try and update you all the time on this relationship I'm having with probation. Remember, if I refresh your memory, December 31st, the Day Reporting Center for Adults closed in Lancaster, even though we have probably the two highest populations of people participating in reentry through AB 109. Right now, probation was going to move forward with the new RFP to reopen it under a guise of rather than a third-party, non-law enforcement body, but more under the guise of probation. As of yesterday, they haven't set a date to even send out that RFP. So as we operate today, even though we have 700, what is it, Pat, between the two, the Antelope Valley wide, over 700 to 800 participants right now in reentry through AB 109. There is no day reporting center that exists. The other side is the Juvenile Day Reporting Center, the facilities opened up. The idea behind that, we were excited about it from a resource management tool, was that would take our deputies less time in the field to deal with juveniles, where they become the most glorified babysitters in the world after they arrest them, to a situation where they would have a drop-off location that would be lessen the impact on community resources and get those deputies in the field. As of today, the building is open. It's occupied by probation staff, but not in a full capacity to operate we're a drop-off center. So we're moving forward with pushing that. I really want to bring forward what the sheriff talked about with Prop 47 and the impacts of some of these issues as it relates to these legislative issues, so we can start really kind of putting dollars and numbers out there to the community to understand the true impact of what's happened here. All it has been a resource shift. It's taken the shift from the responsibility of the state and pushed it down to us to be more innovative of how we do things. In some ways, I think it's made us grow. I'm going to put a little positive spin on it, on being more tactical on how we manage issues and how we deal with things more on a local level. But at the same time, we need to make those other agencies and our legislature responsible for what the financial impact has been. Then the last thing is, you know, Pat and I, we go to all these things. We went to the Day of Dialogue thing, and which I thought, honestly, was okay. What interesting thing I thought was good about it was the representatives from the Department of Justice did not allow people to tape, record what was being discussed or videotape it. So to somehow use it in some other manner. The idea was to actually have dialogue between the community, law enforcement, and city officials or community officials to get down to what everyone's perception of the problems are. So I'll put the positive spin on that. The negative spin is it's the same 50 people every time from the community that come to all this stuff. So with the population we have side, I'd like to see more community involvement as we reach out and do these things. And then we went to the presentation that was sponsored by TCAL the other day with the monitors for the settlement agreement. And I will tell you, if you took the law enforcement people out of the room, the city representatives and the DOJ people, there was probably maybe 15 people there, okay, with issues from the community. And I know one of them was on the front of the paper, and you saw what happened with that. So, but again, we're going to keep involving ourselves with those issues. We're going to put our message out there as well, because I also believe it's important that we change the perception of the public, and then where they identify our community with some of the negativity that we've been identified with for years. I will still say, because I worked all over the county, just like a lot of the representatives in the room here, that we are by far the most racially diverse community in Los Angeles County. There's no doubt in my mind that's true. And I think we keep getting labeled in certain things that are unwarranted. And I believe that's our job to present a different light to that. And that's it. I did good, though. That was only like 8 minutes. I timed myself.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Any questions, anything? Thank you, Lee. Assembly Lackey's office, Russ. Hey.
So real quickly, April's theme will be Prop 47. Is that it? Pardon? April's theme for the meeting? Okay, because I got to prepare my stuff for that. So. And 57. It's all right there. Got plenty of stuff on that. Quite a few things going through the Assembly right now that the Assembly is working on, but the ones that are probably of interest to this group for the most part. AB 6, driving under the influence, the drug driving task force has passed the public safety with unanimous votes, which is very good. Rare up in Sacramento, especially with anything through the public safety. It has now been moved off to appropriations, where it looks pretty good going through that. It was amended twice in the Assembly, and it looks like it's going to move on. So that's a good thing. Getting AB 6 put through there. That's great backing, by the way. The LA County Sheriff's Department, the Deputy District Attorneys support that, and then quite a few other groups. So that's a good thing. One of the things the Assemblyman did was he's requested some money for mental illness training for law enforcement. He had noticed that there's some information came across him that in 2015, more than 1/3 of those who were shot or involved with shootings with the LAPD officers showed signs of mental illness. And so he's requested money for training of law enforcement officers, about 72,000 in the state, to handle mental illness, be more aware of it and have the information available to them. So hopefully we can kind of help that situation with confrontation with those who maybe have a mental illness. So that right there, that's being put through right now to the governor's office. That's not a bill of any sort. It's actually a request for funds. So he's putting that through right now. So other than that, those are the two things that are of interest, and I'll move on. Any questions?
Russ? Thanks, Russ.
All right.
Any questions? No representative from Senator Wilkes' office? Guess not. Okay. This is the time that any individual who'd like to speak on non-agendized items can fill out a speaker's card. You have 3 minutes. And you're just in time. Mr. Paul.
Mr. Vice Chair and Commissioners, good morning. It's always a pleasure to come here. I learned so much. I enjoyed that comprehensive violence reduction strategy. To me, it's kind of like those commercials for LifeLock where I'm just a robbery monitor, and they say, what's the use of monitoring a problem if you can't fix it? That's what we're looking for, is solutions. I appreciate that. Captain Nelson, thank you so much for all you've done. And I always enjoy seeing you out in the community, and I think that's part of what makes you a fantastic leader for the department here, your involvement, your personal involvement in this community. Mr. Franklin, thank you. The CHP, thank you. Getting these kids and getting their attention around what they're doing, that's all very helpful stuff. So we keep trying. There's a lot of changes to come in the Justice Department, and some of these funds, the streaming funds, won't be there. We don't know what's going to happen, but I always appreciate what we do in this city to address our problems head on, and that's all I want to say. Thank you so much. It helps me to come here and see a community that works in action. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Appreciate it. Commissioner comments, anything? Okay, we'll adjourn the meeting until Wednesday, April 12th, 2017 at 10 a.m.